So, imagine you're 16 years old, right?
Okay.
You've spent months, like, just meticulously drawing up blueprints for this community construction project.
The classic safe
Yeah,
plan.
exactly. It's totally safe. It's thoroughly approved by all the adults in charge. And, that basically guarantees you're going to hit this major milestone. In this case, earning your Eagle Scout rank.
Right, which is a huge deal.
It is. But now, imagine taking every single page of that carefully crafted plan and just throwing it in the trash.
Just scrapping the whole thing.
Completely starting over from absolute scratch. And all because of like a 5-second glance out of a car window.
That's not your typical high school experience.
Not at all. So today we are doing a deep dive into the anatomy of a pivot. We're unpacking this huge stack of documents we have here, impact reports, organizational summaries, letters of reference, and they all detail the rise of this initiative called Beyond the Bridge.
Which is just a fascinating case study.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the mission for you listening and for us today is to figure out exactly how a 16-year-old named Zyan Martin scaled this theoretical youth initiative into a lasting, officially incorporated community organization.
Yeah, and I think to really appreciate the scale of that pivot, we kind of need to set a baseline, right? Like, what do we usually expect from a youth volunteer project?
Usually. Maybe a car wash.
Right. Or, collecting canned goods. Typically, these efforts are highly bounded. A teenager needs some mandatory service hours. The adults set the parameters. The kid logs the hours. And then, well, the project just ends.
Check the box and move on.
Exactly.
Right.
But what we are analyzing today is a total anomaly. We are looking at a project that rapidly evolved into a pending 501c3 nonprofit.
Wow.
Yeah, operating with a board-level strategic framework and executing these comprehensive community partnerships over in North Carolina.
That is wild. So let's isolate the precise moment that evolution began.
Oh.
Because honestly, the why here is just as important as the how.
Oh, absolutely.
So, okay, fall of 2024. Zyan's operating within those traditional boundaries you just mentioned. He was designing this physical structure for a shelter to fulfill his Eagle Scout service project requirement.
The original blueprint.
Right. The SAFE plan. But then, on this really cold, rainy morning in January 2025, he's riding to school with his grandfather. And he just looks out the car window and sees these homeless individuals visibly freezing on the side of the road.
Just shivering in the rain.
Yeah. And that visceral visual just completely overrides his agenda. But I have to ask, why take the risk?
What do you mean?
Well, I call it the tyranny of the original plan, right? The requirement for the Scout badge was basically already met by the construction plan.
That's true.
So changing course at that late stage, it just introduces massive logistical hurdles. Why not just finish the SAFE project?
Well, I think it reveals a really critical distinction in organizational leadership. It's the difference between just executing a mandate and actually responding to real-time data.
Real-time data being the people he saw on the roadside.
Exactly. When Zyan saw people freezing, he received immediate, undeniable data that his community's needs they didn't align with his current project timeline.
Right. Building a shelter structure is great for the future, but it doesn't help someone right now.
Bingo. It provides zero physiological warmth today. So he recognized an acute crisis and actively chose to adapt his entire mission. He wanted to address the immediate human suffering rather than just comfortably checking that box for his own advancement.
Which takes a lot of courage. But having a great realization in a car doesn't automatically translate into a functioning humanitarian intervention.
No, it definitely doesn't.
So let's look at the actual mechanics of how he pulled this off. Because he didn't just start throwing blankets out of his car window.
Right, he was much more strategic than that.
Yeah, he identified this highly specific, really complex blind spot in the city's safety net.
Right, he zeroed in on what experts often call the 24 to 72-hour window of sudden housing displacement.
The critical first few days.
Exactly, because the statistical reality is that the broader municipal safety net usually works, eventually.
Eventually being the operative word there.
Yeah. Experts advise that roughly 90% of displaced families do find some form of temporary housing or institutional support within 72 hours.
But man, I imagine those first 3 days before the system actually catches you, that has to be absolute chaos.
The psychological toll of those initial hours is just staggering. I mean, imagine a family losing their housing unexpectedly.
It's terrifying.
You have kids, you are suddenly untethered from your entire routine, you literally do not know where you are sleeping that night, and those long-term support systems, they haven't kicked in yet.
Because bureaucracy takes time.
Exactly. So that 72-hour gap is a period of profound instability and acute trauma. Think of the long-term shelters and housing programs as essentially the hospital in this scenario.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah, they facilitate the long-term healing and stabilization.
Which would make Zyan's initiative, Beyond the Bridge, the ambulance ride.
Yes. Perfect way to put it.
It doesn't replace the hospital, but it provides that critical triage required to keep a family safe, right? To preserve their dignity and stabilize their situation the second the crisis hits, at least until the larger institutional systems can process their intake.
And that operational clarity is exactly what makes this initiative so incredibly effective. But to build that ambulance, Zyan recognized a pretty fundamental limitation.
Namely that he's 16.
Right. A 16-year-old cannot legally or logistically execute a citywide crisis response alone.
So what did he do?
He utilized a highly strategic, collaborative approach. He actually partnered with his project coach, Zyan Martin of Martin Sloan International.
Oh, to serve as kind of an operational framework builder.
Exactly. Together, they structured an organization that could actually interface with adult-centric legal and corporate entities.
That is so smart. Let's dig into that framework, actually, because they implemented what the source documents call a dignity-centered model of care.
Which is a great phrase.
It sounds amazing on paper, but the actual execution of it is what's really fascinating. They brought in Earl Owens of Groundwater Solutions to handle the onboarding process for displaced families.
Right. And Owens didn't just hand out basic intake forms.
No. He provided free mental and behavioral health support right at the point of contact.
Which is a really sophisticated intervention strategy.
I mean, how unusual is it for a youth leader to immediately recognize the need for something as complex as behavioral health assessments in a shelter project?
It's incredibly rare. Typically, emergency youth projects focus entirely on the physiological, calories and warmth.
Food and coats.
Exactly. But by building mental health triage into the very first step of the intake process, Beyond the Bridge basically acknowledges that sudden homelessness is a psychological trauma, not just a logistical problem.
And they applied that exact same philosophy to the actual housing component, too. They partnered with Charlotte Garden Inn and Suites to secure discounted emergency hotel accommodations.
Skipping the whole gymnasium full of cots model.
Exactly. Bypassing that standard model entirely. Because giving a family a private hotel room provides an immediate restoration of privacy and safety. It gives them a quiet environment to actually process the trauma of the previous 24 hours.
And that accelerates the stabilization process so much. I mean, when a family has a locking door, a private bathroom, and immediate access to a behavioral health professional, their baseline stress levels drop significantly.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, and it makes them far more capable of navigating all that complex paperwork and logistics required by the long-term hospital systems we discussed earlier.
Okay, but here is where the math kind of stops making sense to me.
Uh-oh.
Well, you have a high school student with a brilliant triage concept. But private hotel rooms, even discounted ones, cost real money.
They do.
Professional behavioral therapy costs money. So how does a teenager build a financial and operational bridge of this magnitude before he can even legally sign a corporate contract?
Well, he achieved it through what we can define as hyperlocal resource mapping.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Instead of trying to raise like $100,000 to build a new shelter from the ground up, he just mapped out the resources that already existed in his community.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Hotel rooms sitting empty, mental health professionals willing to donate time, and he just built the connective tissue between them.
So he acted way more like a startup incubator than a traditional top-down charity.
Exactly.
He identified the latent assets in his community and created a specialized pipeline to deploy them toward this specific 72-hour gap.
But doing that required serious manpower. The mobilization effort detailed in the impact reports is actually pretty substantial.
Yeah, I saw those numbers.
Zyan recruited 43 volunteers who collectively clocked over 400 volunteer hours.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
And, if you are listening to this and you happen to manage a team, consider how Zyan structured his ask to those volunteers.
It was brilliant.
It really was. He mobilized his own community. Specifically, he got his entire scout troop from Ebenezer Baptist Church to participate. But he didn't just ask them to commit to some abstract, never-ending cause.
Right. People burn out on that.
Exactly. He asked them to fill highly specific, actionable logistical gaps.
Which yields highly measurable results. The resource distribution was incredibly targeted. So those 43 volunteers, they funded 15 emergency hotel room nights.
Wow.
They distributed $250 in targeted food assistance cards and 7 cases of snacks to ensure immediate caloric needs were met.
Just incredible.
And they didn't stop there. They also sorted and provided over 60 pounds of clothing, scaling from newborn all the way to adult sizes.
Oh, that's such a vital detail.
Yeah, ensuring families weren't left without basic apparel after a sudden eviction or displacement.
And they also took the initiative directly to the streets. The documents outline this direct outreach along Charlotte's Beatty's Ford Road corridor.
Right, the boots on the ground stuff.
Exactly. The team physically distributed over 500 hygiene and sock bags to more than 90 individuals and families out there. Plus, they organized and served full hot meals to well over 80 residents staying at the emergency hotel.
It's just massive. When you aggregate the localized outreach with the hotel stabilization program, the total impact reaches over 200 individuals helped across Mecklenburg County.
Over 200 people. From a teenager's project.
Yeah. And financially, Zyan managed to raise $2,840 in direct monetary contributions, while simultaneously facilitating over $2,000 in donated clothing, food, and hygiene supplies through those community pipelines.
Okay, but I need to play devil's advocate for a second regarding the management of those pipelines.
Sure.
Because we are talking about coordinating with corporate staffing agencies, like 2X Staffing, right? And aligning with established community groups like We Are One Charlotte.
Right, heavy hitters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have seen seasoned adult executives struggle to align that many distinct corporate and nonprofit cultures.
Right.
Why would a corporate staffing agency take operational direction from a high school student?
It's a great question, and the answer really lies in the leadership style that's documented by all the adults who work alongside him.
Tell me more about that.
Well, a teenager obviously cannot lead a corporate partner through aggressive authority, right? They just don't have the leverage.
No, they'd get laughed out of the room.
Right. So Zyan effectively utilizes this quiet servant leadership model. He listens, he absorbs operational feedback, and he physically performs the unglamorous groundwork right alongside his volunteers.
Leading by example.
Exactly. When corporate partners observe a founder taking ultimate responsibility for the execution rather than just dictating orders from the sidelines, it builds a really deep, rapid trust.
That observation actually aligns perfectly with the stack of reference letters included in our sources, because looking at this massive logistical achievement naturally raises the question of who is actually driving this engine.
And what kind of person he is.
Right. And his track record proves this isn't just a sudden, collegiate resume building phase.
Yeah.
Zyan actually earned his Eagle Scout rank in October 2025 and is a finalist for the 2026 National Eagle Scout Service Project of the Year.
Which is a huge honor.
Huge.
Yeah.
But his roots in community service go back an astonishingly long time.
The documentation shows a really consistent pattern of behavior here. I mean, he has been purchasing and serving meals at the Charlotte Rescue Mission since he was 4 years old.
4. I was eating sand at 4.
Right. And he has participated in roadside cleanups 3 times a year for 6 years. During middle school, he even traveled to Puerto Rico to physically assist with storm debris cleanup.
Yeah, I read through the specific reference letters. There's one from his varsity swim coach, Don Patton, his minister, Reverend Kevin Butler, and his scout leader, Thomas Carter.
And what did they say?
What really stood out to me wasn't just that they think he's a good kid. They highlighted this structural advantage in his personality. Reverend Butler noted that Zyan lives his values and is kind without needing an audience.
That's key.
Right. And Coach Patton emphasized that his leadership is rooted entirely in self-motivation rather than a desire for public recognition.
Which, honestly, is crucial from an organizational standpoint. In this era of performative charity and social media activists, a nonprofit founder who is driven by intrinsic motivation is heavily insulated from burnout.
Because they aren't chasing likes.
Exactly. Leaders who rely on external validation or public praise often falter when the work becomes tedious or unglamorous.
And nonprofit work is mostly unglamorous.
Exactly. So Zyan's ability to maintain a 3.9 plus GPA, take dual enrollment college courses, participate in the Duke University Talent Identification Program, and run a crisis intervention team. It is a testament to an internally generated drive.
It ensures the longevity of the organization, really.
Yeah.
He isn't dependent on a megaphone to keep the engine running, which is exactly why Beyond the Bridge is transitioning from a high school project into a permanent fixture.
Right. Of the funds raised during that initial mobilization, roughly $1,546 has been strategically ring-fenced.
Oh, set aside specifically.
Yeah, designated specifically toward the formal 501c3 filing and operational expansion. This literally incorporates the initiative into a legal entity capable of receiving institutional grants.
And he isn't just handing the reins over to an adult board and walking away either. The operational framework explicitly states that Zyan plans to continue leading the organization and expanding its services throughout his college years.
Which brings us to the ultimate long-term vision detailed in the framework. Because operating within the 72-hour triage window was the necessary starting point. But Zyan envisions beyond the bridge eventually owning and operating a dedicated temporary housing facility.
Like a physical footprint in the city.
Yes. But importantly, not just a warehouse for beds, the blueprints outline a facility that offers comprehensive wraparound support services.
So treating the whole problem, not just the symptom.
Exactly. By expanding his current partnership model, this physical space will integrate workforce training, life counseling, active mentorship, and job placement assistance directly on site.
Man, he is essentially trying to build a new municipal power grid. Instead of just acting as a temporary bridge, he is designing a permanent infrastructure where emergency housing, behavioral therapy, and economic job placement all plug into the exact same central hub.
And the necessity for that hub is pretty stark. I mean, there are more than 2,800 individuals sleeping on the streets of Mecklenburg County on any given night.
2,800.
Wow, yeah. Zyan's trajectory demonstrates that he isn't just trying to apply a localized Band-Aid to that statistic. He is working to engineer a sustainable, systemic solution. He is providing empirical proof that youth initiatives, when stripped of their traditional boundaries and organized with strategic partnerships, can effectively untangle complex urban crises.
Well, we have covered some incredible ground today. Let's synthesize the key takeaways from these sources really quickly. We've unpacked the anatomy of a pivot, tracing Zyan Martin's journey from a safe construction project to the realization of a critical 24 to 72-hour gap in emergency housing.
Right. And we've examined the mechanics of his dignity-centered model, how he mapped local resources to provide private hotel rooms and free behavioral health triage.
Yeah, and we saw the tangible results of that strategy, mobilizing 43 volunteers, logging 400 hours, and delivering highly targeted nutritional, clothing, and hygiene resources to over 200 displaced individuals.
All while utilizing a quiet, intrinsically motivated leadership style that brought corporate and community partners to the table. And, of course, legally incorporating the organization and setting the stage to build a comprehensive wraparound housing facility during his college years.
It really serves as a masterclass in hyperlocal resource management and empathetic execution.
It absolutely does.
And it leaves us with something I want you, the listener, to deeply consider. We have spent this entire conversation analyzing how Zyan rewired his community's response to homelessness. But think about those 43 volunteers he mobilized, many of whom were teenagers from his own scout troop.
Yeah, that ripple effect.
Right. If one 16-year-old's decision to pivot can effectively rewire the empathy and operational skills of dozens of his peers before they even reach adulthood, how does a generation raised on active, systemic crisis intervention reshape our public policy 20 years from now?
That's a powerful thought.
Right. Zyan's entire movement started because he looked out a car window on a cold morning and decided not to look away. So what cold, rainy morning moments are you driving past every single day? And what could you build if you finally decided to stop the car?